Time is the most precious and non-renewable resource that any human being can ever hope to possess during their short and very complex journey. We often spend our days wishing for the weekend or the next big holiday without realizing that we are wishing away the very fabric of life. This story follows a man named Elias who was given a magical chance to skip the moments he found boring or difficult or simply too long. It serves as a powerful reminder that the beauty of our existence is found in the process and not just in the final destination reached. Let us explore the value of every single second as we begin this tale of wisdom and regret and the ultimate power of the present. The ancient town of Oakhaven was nestled between the rolling emerald hills and the restless gray waves of the vast and ancient northern Atlantic Ocean. Young Elias spent his days wandering through the golden fields of wheat while the sun cast long shadows over the quiet and peaceful coastal landscape. He was a dreamer who often ignored the heavy burdens of his daily chores to watch the white clouds drift slowly across the bright sky. His father was a hard-working fisherman who believed that every single second of the day should be spent doing something productive for the entire family. The old man often warned his son that time was a precious resource, which once spent could never be reclaimed by even the wealthiest kings. Elias would simply smile and nod his head while secretly wishing that he could find a way to make the boring parts of life disappear. He imagined a world where he could skip over the long hours of cleaning the fish and the tedious lessons provided by the village schoolmaster. One afternoon, while exploring a narrow and cobblestoned alleyway he had never seen before, he stumbled upon a small shop with a very weathered sign. The window of the shop was filled with hundreds of ticking clocks of all shapes and sizes, which created a rhythmic sound like a heavy heartbeat. A thin layer of dust covered the glass panes, making it difficult to see the mysterious treasures that were hidden deep within the dark interior. Curiosity eventually overcame his hesitation, so he slowly pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly as if it were groaning from ancient age. Inside, he met an old man with eyes like polished silver who seemed to be waiting for someone to enter his mysterious and silent ticking realm. The air was thick with the scent of aged cedar and metallic oil, which gave the room a feeling of being suspended outside of time. The shopkeeper held a small golden hourglass that glimmered with an internal light, which appeared to defy the shadows lurking in the corners of the room. He told Elias that this magical device had the power to accelerate the boring moments of life, so that only the exciting parts would ever remain. Elias thought of the long hours spent in school or working in the fields and felt a surge of excitement at this incredible and rare opportunity. Without considering the potential consequences of such a magical gift, the young man reached out his hand and accepted the object from the mysterious merchant. The old man whispered a warning that time, once skipped, can never be reclaimed, but Elias was already turning the golden glass over in his hands. He decided to test the device during the very next morning when he had to attend a particularly long and tedious lecture about ancient world history. As the teacher began to speak in a droning voice, Elias gripped the hourglass tightly and willed the sands to fall faster through the narrow neck. Suddenly, the room blurred into a streak of colors and shapes until he found himself walking out of the classroom as the final bell rang loudly. He felt a sense of triumph because he had avoided 2 hours of boredom, while his classmates looked exhausted from the mental effort of the lesson. Over the next few weeks, Elias used the hourglass to skip past household chores, long walks in the cold rain, and even his difficult evening study sessions. He felt like a master of his own destiny because he only experienced the moments of joy, laughter, and relaxation that life had to offer him. However, he did not notice that his mother seemed a little bit older each time he skipped a day of work to play with friends. The seasons began to change with a rapid pace that he found slightly disorienting, yet the convenience of the hourglass was too addictive to simply stop. He started to skip entire weeks of preparation for his future career, believing that he could simply arrive at the moment of his ultimate and final success. Elias soon found himself as a young man entering the workforce, but he had no patience for the slow climb of the corporate ladder of success. He turned the hourglass to skip the entry-level positions and the late nights spent at the office trying to learn the basics of his chosen profession. In what felt like a matter of days to him, he was sitting in a corner office with a high salary and many subordinates under him. He was wealthy and powerful, yet he realized that he had no memory of the hard work that had supposedly earned him such a high status. When his colleagues spoke of the great projects they had completed together, Elias could only nod and pretend that he remembered those long and collaborative hours. He felt like a stranger in his own life, a ghost haunting a success that he had not truly lived through with his heart and mind. One evening, he sat alone in his massive apartment and realized that he had skipped the entire process of falling in love with his beautiful wife. They had met, dated, and married in the blink of an eye because he had been too impatient to experience the slow growth of affection. She looked at him with eyes that sought a connection he could not provide because he had not spent the time to truly know her soul. The realization began to gnaw at his conscience, but the habit of skipping the uncomfortable moments was now a fundamental part of his very daily existence. Soon they had children, but Elias found the sleepless nights and the constant crying of the infants to be far too taxing for his restless spirit. He used the hourglass to skip past the diaper changes and the midnight feedings, wanting to arrive at the time when they could finally walk. Before he knew it, his children were running through the garden, but he realized he had missed their first steps and their very first spoken words. He tried to play with them, but they seemed like strangers who did not know how to interact with a father who was rarely present. His wife grew distant, her face lined with the silent fatigue of raising a family alone, while Elias was busy accelerating through their shared life. Every time a conflict arose or a difficult conversation was required, he would simply turn the golden glass and find himself in a more peaceful moment. He did not understand that the peace he found was hollow because it was not built on the resolution of the problems they had faced. The years began to bleed into one another until the colors of the world seemed to fade into a dull gray that lacked any real substance. He looked in the mirror and saw a man with graying hair and tired eyes, wondering where the vibrant youth of his past had gone. He had saved so much time, yet he had nothing to show for it, except a collection of luxury items and a house silent. One morning, Elias received a phone call telling him that his father was very ill and did not have much time left in this world. He rushed to his childhood home, but the journey felt too long and the anxiety was too much for his fragile mind to handle. In a moment of panic and weakness, he turned the hourglass one last time, hoping to reach the moment when his father would be healthy. When the world stopped spinning, he found himself standing in the familiar cemetery of his town, surrounded by friends and family dressed in black clothes. He realized with a heavy heart that he had skipped the final days of his father's life and the chance to say a proper goodbye. The weight of his regret was a physical burden that made it difficult to breathe as he stared at the fresh earth of the grave. He looked at his mother, who was now a frail, old woman leaning on a cane, and he saw the immense sorrow etched into her. She did not recognize the man standing before her because he had been absent for so many years of her life during his selfish quest. Elias fell to his knees and wept for the time he had discarded like trash, realizing that the boring moments were actually the most precious. He clutched the golden hourglass in his shaking hands and cursed the day he had ever entered that mysterious shop in the hidden backstreet alleyway. He realized that the value of a diamond comes from the immense pressure it endures over millions of years, deep beneath the surface of the earth. Similarly, the value of a human life is found in the struggles, the waiting, and the quiet moments that build the foundation of our character. Elias looked at the hourglass and saw that there was only a tiny bit of sand left in the upper chamber of the glass vessel. He knew that he had lived a long life in terms of years, but in terms of actual experience, he was still a very young man. Desperate to fix his mistakes, he began to search for the old clockmaker's shop, hoping that he could trade his remaining time for a second. He walked through the streets of his village, but everything had changed so much that he could no longer find the familiar landmarks of his youth. The small bakery was now a modern supermarket, and the open fields where he used to dream were covered in rows of identical suburban houses. Every person he passed was looking at a small device in their hand, hurrying along just as he had done during his own life. He saw a young boy sitting on a bench, looking bored and tapping his foot impatiently while he waited for the bus to arrive. Elias wanted to scream at the boy, to cherish the boredom, for it was in those empty moments that the soul truly had room. Finally, tucked away behind a large oak tree that had survived the passage of time, he saw the small weathered sign of the clockmaker's shop. The door creaked as he entered, and the smell of old wood and oil filled his nostrils, bringing back a flood of memories from youth. The old man was still there, looking exactly as he had decades ago, as if he existed outside the flow of time governing others. Elias threw the golden hourglass onto the counter and begged the man to take it back and return the years that he had lost. The clockmaker picked up the device and looked at it with a sad smile, noting that the sand was almost gone from the bulb of the glass. He explained that time is the only currency that can never be earned back once it has been spent on things that do not matter. You wanted a life without pain or boredom, but you forgot that those are the things that give the joy. Elias fell to the floor, his heart breaking as he understood that his wealth and status were worth nothing in the face of his years. The clockmaker then offered him a choice. He could use the last grain of sand to return to any single moment from his past life. Elias thought of his father's smile, his wife's early laughter, and the soft scent of his children's hair when they were still very small. He realized that choosing just one moment would be impossible because every single second he had discarded was equally precious in its unique way. Instead of choosing a moment of joy, he asked to be returned to the very first day he had entered the shop as a boy. He wanted to live the hard parts, the boring parts, and the painful parts so that he could truly say that he had lived. The clockmaker nodded and turned the hourglass one final time, causing the world to dissolve into a swirl of golden dust and bright, blinding light. When Elias opened his eyes, he was standing in the dusty back street, the golden hourglass still in the hands of the mysterious and ancient merchant. The old man offered the gift to him once again, but this time Elias looked at the object with a sense of profound fear and wisdom. He politely declined the offer, thanking the man for the lesson, and walked out into the bright sunlight of the beautiful and warm afternoon. He did not run toward his house. Instead, he walked slowly, noticing the way the light played on the leaves of the tall oak trees. He stopped to talk to a neighbor he usually ignored, listening intently to the long story about the man's garden and the pests he fought. For the first time in his life, he felt truly present, as if he were finally waking up from a long and very deep sleep. He went home and helped his father with the heavy chores, finding a strange sort of satisfaction in the physical labor and the work.
He studied hard for his exams, embracing the frustration of difficult problems because he knew that overcoming them would make him a much stronger person. When he eventually met the woman who would become his wife, he took the time to listen to her dreams and her many fears. They spent hours walking in the rain, not because they had to, but because the rain was a part of the world they shared. Their courtship was slow and deliberate, built on a foundation of shared experiences that created a bond that could never be broken by any storm. When their children were born, Elias stayed awake during the long nights, rocking them to sleep and memorizing the tiny details of their faces. He did not wish for them to grow up faster. He cherished every stage of their development, from the first crawl to the first. In his professional life, he worked his way up from the bottom, learning every detail of the trade and earning the respect of peers. When he finally reached the corner office, he felt a sense of pride because he knew every step of the journey that had led. He was not a ghost in his own life anymore. He was the architect, the builder, and the resident of a home built. Many years later, when his father was finally nearing the end of his life, Elias sat by his bedside and held his weathered hand. They did not need many words because they had spent a lifetime speaking to one another through actions, presence, and constant and unwavering support. When the end finally came, Elias felt a deep sadness, but he did not feel the crushing weight of regret that had haunted. He had been there for every moment, the good and the bad, and that presence was the greatest gift he could have given. As Elias himself grew old, his hair turned white and his joints began to ache, but he welcomed these signs of a life. He would sit on his porch in the evenings, watching the sunset with his wife, who was still his best friend and his most trusted. They would talk about the many years they had shared, laughing at the old struggles and crying softly for the friends they had lost. His children, now grown and successful in their own right, visited him often and brought their own children to hear his many wise stories. He told them the story of the golden hourglass, warning them that time is a gift that must be unwrapped slowly and with care. Do not rush to the end of the book, he would say, because the beauty of the story is found in every word. One evening, Elias felt a strange sense of peace wash over him as he watched the final rays of the sun disappear. He knew that his own time was coming to an end, but he did not feel any fear because he had used his time. He looked at his hands, which were wrinkled and scarred from a lifetime of work, and he saw a map of a journey traveled. He closed his eyes and saw the image of the old clockmaker one last time, nodding in approval at the life Elias had chosen. The value of time is not measured by how much we can accomplish in a day, but by how much love we can give. It is measured by the connections we make, the lessons we learn, and the quiet moments of reflection that help us to understand. Elias passed away in his sleep, surrounded by the echoes of a life that had been lived with intention, patience, and a deep gratitude. His story was passed down through the generations of his family, serving as a reminder to never take a single second for granted ever again. People in the village began to slow down, taking the time to look at the sky and to listen to the birds singing. They realized that the most boring moments were often the ones where the most important internal growth was actually taking place within their hearts. The legacy of Elias was not found in the wealth he left behind, but in the wisdom he shared with everyone who listened. Time is the canvas upon which we paint the masterpiece of our existence, and every stroke of the brush is vital to the image. If we skip the difficult strokes, the painting will be incomplete and will lack the depth and the contrast that makes it beautiful. We must learn to embrace the waiting, the silence, and the mundane tasks of daily life, for they are the threads that weave our... When we look back at the end of our journey, we will not remember the times we hurried, but the times we stood still. Elias became the wisest man in his village because he understood that the most important time is always right now, in this very specific moment. He taught us that to value time is to value life itself, for the two are intertwined in a way that can never be severed. Let us reflect on the golden hourglass that sits on the shelf of our own hearts and minds as we navigate the world. Are we turning the glass too quickly, trying to reach a future that has not yet been earned by the efforts of our today? Or are we watching the sands fall with a sense of peace, knowing that we have used every single grain to the absolute fullest? The choice is yours, just as it was once offered to Elias in that dusty shop in the hidden backstreets of his town. Choose to be present, choose to be patient, and choose to love every second of the life that you have been so graciously given. For in the silence between the ticks of the clock, there is a world of wonder waiting for those who are brave enough to experience. May your journey be long, may your lessons be deep, and may you never feel the need to skip a single heartbeat of your existence. The story of Elias is a mirror for our own lives, showing us that the most valuable thing we have is the time we have been given. Treasure it like the rarest of gems, and it will reward you with a life that is rich in spirit, memory, and love. This is the ultimate truth of the human experience, a lesson that rings out across the ages to every soul who dares to listen. The value of time is the value of your soul's progression through the physical world, a journey that is meant to be savored. Let every word you speak and every action you take be a testament to the fact that you understand the weight of every moment. Walk slowly, breathe deeply, and look into the eyes of those you love with the knowledge that this moment will never happen again. You are the master of your seconds, the guardian of your minutes, and the author of the years that will eventually make up your life. Make it a story worth telling, a story worth hearing, and most importantly, a story that was truly lived with every part of your being. As the stars began to twinkle in the vast and dark velvet sky, the memory of Elias continued to shine like a beacon. His children's children would sit by the fireplace and recount the tale of the man who chose the long path over the short. They understood that the rush of the modern world was an illusion that sought to rob them of the richness found in the passing of time. The village became known as a place where time stood still, not because progress had stopped, but because people had finally learned to experience every moment. Visitors from the city would come to experience the peace and the presence that the villagers practiced with every breath and every word. They would leave with a new perspective, realizing that their busy lives were often just a series of distractions from the things that truly mattered. And so the lesson of the golden hourglass lived on, reminding every soul that the present moment is the only one we ever possess. Let us treat each hour as a sacred gift, for once it is gone, no amount of wealth or power can ever bring it back. Live deeply, love truly, and never forget that the most beautiful parts of the journey are often found in the quiet moments of the long days. Your time is your life, so spend it wisely and with a heart full of wonder for the magic that exists in every second. To understand the value of time, one must imagine a bank that credits your account each morning with exactly 86,000 seconds. Every night, it deletes whatever part of that balance you have failed to invest in a good purpose or a meaningful connection. It carries over no balance from the previous day, and it allows no overdraft, so you must live in the present on the strength of today's allotment, making every second count toward a life that is full of meaning. The clock is always running, and the sands are always falling, but we have the power to decide what kind of world we want to create with our time. Elias learned that skipping time was like tearing pages out of a book just to see how the story ended without reading it. You might find out what happens, but you will never understand why it happened or feel the emotions that the author intended. Every moment of boredom is an opportunity for creativity, and every moment of pain is an opportunity for the development of empathy. Do not fear the slow days, for they are the ones that allow your roots to grow deep into the soil of your existence. When we are young, we think that time is a vast ocean that we can never exhaust, but as we age, we realize it is more like a stream that flows quickly. And while we cannot stop the water, we can choose to dip our hands into it and feel it. We can choose to build a bridge across it, or we can choose to swim in its currents, but we must never waste it. Elias became the wisest man in his village because he understood that the most important time is always right now, in this very specific moment. He taught us that to value time is to value life itself, for the two are intertwined in a way that can never be severed. May your path be filled with the awareness of the precious nature of every second, and may you find joy in the slowness of every moment. The sun will rise and set whether we are ready or not, but we can choose to greet each dawn with a heart full of gratitude. Let the story of the golden hourglass be a guide.
Thank you so much for watching this video and for spending your precious time with us as we explored this very important moral. If you found this story helpful, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content that we encourage you to practice these lessons in your daily life. Your support helps us to create more meaningful stories that can change the way people view the world and their place within. We truly appreciate your engagement, and we look forward to bringing you more wisdom and inspiration in the many videos to come.